Hello, how are you doing? Welcome. My name's Nani. I'm here working as a volunteer with the Community Coalition for Public Health. So I have some information about nutritional eating, and if you're interested, you can sit down and I can give you one of our pamphlets and kind of go over some stuff. Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure to meet you. So, to start off, do you have any kids? Okay, great. So, we actually have some pamphlets here that are designed for, they're designed with families of young children in mind. So, we actually have some fun activities in them. We have a version in English and a version in Spanish, but we have a couple of fun activities in here for kids, as well as some information that's catered more towards parents. But overall, it's focused on how to have some more balanced, nutritious meals in a way that's still budget friendly. A lot of the people that come by this facility are of lower income, so a lot of our guests here end up getting a lot of their food from places like the dollar store, discount stores, or food pantries. So we developed this with that in mind. So there are a couple of tips and tricks in here for how to make kind of food pantry staples a little bit more nutritional when possible. And I do have some examples here of some foods that can contribute towards a nutritional balanced diet that can typically be found at more budget-friendly stores or at food pantries. So we'll go over all of that with you in a sec. So first, I just wanted to go over the little pamphlet with you, if that's okay. Yeah, the English one or the Spanish one? English, right? Okay. So this is, again, just healthy eating tips for families. So again, we tried to go for a more child-friendly, family-friendly look. And this has some information for you and for your children. So we can go over it real quick over here. So we've got some basic did you know facts. We have some grab and go snacks. And then at the very middle, we have some tips and tricks of healthy eating. And then some more fun facts over here. We've got a nice little maze for your kids to play around with. And then over here, we've got an example of the My Plate portion sizes, recommended portion sizes, and there's a little blank template, so if your child wants to fill it in with whatever they think is their ideal balanced diet, they can do that there. So we have some more tips and tricks here, and I'm going to go over those with you in a second. I just wanted to kind of show you the layout of the pamphlet. So on the back, we've got a little word search, again, more catered towards the kids, but of course you can do it as well. It's for whoever wants to. But we've got some words in the back that are related to nutritional needs. And that's just to kind of reinforce that teaching that we want to get out of the pamphlet. Let me just fold this back up. So you can take this if you want. Alright, so just some basic facts and information for healthy eating today. And I do have this printed out copy that I can give to you at the end if you would like. It has a lot of the same information, just more in a bulleted format. And we do again have it in English, and we also have it in Spanish on the second page. So The very first thing that we wanted to go over is just that a healthy and balanced diet is made up of protein, dairy, vegetables, fruits, healthy fats, and whole grains. So those are the major food groups, which you'll see in this pamphlet here. In this little My Plate portion over here, we've got the fruits, we've got the vegetables, we've got the protein, the grains, and we've got dairy. So this is a little bit more simplified, of course, but within these groups we want to really emphasize whole grains being important whenever it's possible to get them. Obviously fruits and vegetables, proteins, and instead of purely dairy, just healthy fats in general are very good for you. And we'll go into a little bit more of what that is and why that is, okay? So you can have that back there. All right. So just to start off with some facts, did you know that in the US, families often struggle to get enough important nutrients in their diets? So things such as iron, calcium, and potassium, which are really important for growth, those are very hard to get in the typical American family meal. So by following the tips that we have here today that we'll talk about and that are in your pamphlet, your family can eat a more balanced and nutritious diet, and that way you can all help develop strong and healthy minds and bodies, especially for your kids as they grow. So this also helps prevent or manage conditions like obesity, diabetes, and high blood pressure. And those are all pretty common in the US right now, so definitely want to look at how to prevent and manage them. Okay, so the first thing that we wanted to point out from our little pamphlet on this second page, the same as the one with the My Plate outline, is emphasizing to eat the rainbow. So what do we mean by that? By that, we want to point out that different fruits and vegetables have a lot of different nutrients. So the more varied in color they are, the more of those different nutrients you're going to be getting. So sometimes dark leafy green vegetables are going to have certain nutrients, while red vegetables are going to have other nutrients. So it really varies a lot depending on the color and just the type of fruit and vegetable. That's why we want to really vary it up. So eating them from every different color of the rainbow every day, or as many different colors of fruits and veggies as you can, is very important. Vitamins from colorful fruits and vegetables help act like a shield for a child's body. So this helps them fight off sickness and also just prevents them from getting sick in the first place. So one of our little tips for this is that if fresh vegetables aren't available, you can try to add low sodium canned or frozen veggies to your meals, or you can use frozen fruits to make smoothies, things like that. So there's a lot of different ways that we can incorporate them into our diet, and I do have some examples here of some canned vegetable variations. So one example, and this is from Aldi, but again, it's a canned item, so you can probably find this type of thing at a dollar store or a food pantry if that is where you go. And even at Aldi, this isn't super expensive. It tends to go on sale. But this is canned roasted red bell peppers. So bell peppers, there you have your red food item, and this is a vegetable, and it's nice and healthy. Doesn't have a whole lot of calories per serving, but at the same time is more nutritionally dense. So that's very good to incorporate into meals. Another option, I obviously don't have frozen things here with me right now, but frozen spinach goes a long way, and those dark leafy green vegetables are very important. So things like spinach, kale, I know it's hard to find them fresh sometimes, or they tend to go bad a lot faster, but if you find them frozen, the nutritional content actually tends to be retained a little bit better than with fresh vegetables sometimes. especially when it's cooked, because the process of freezing helps retain. There's some type of chemistry going on there, but we don't need to worry about all the nitpicky scientific stuff behind it. Just know that frozen vegetables are still very good and a very valid choice for a nutritional diet, and it's always good to use it just to supplement our meals. So what's a typical meal that you would eat on a weekday? Okay, like rice and beans. Yeah, so that's a great meal, especially to start off with. So something that we could do to build off of that, again trying to add our vegetables to there, would be if you were to get something like canned bell peppers, you could add a little bit of that to your rice while it's cooking, especially if you chop them up really tiny, where I know sometimes kids can be picky eaters, that way they might not be able to notice them as much, but chopping them up really tiny and mixing them in maybe with some beans, that could be a great way to add some variation there. Another thing you can do with peppers and tomatoes, for example, we've got our tomato sauce, another great source of a vegetable here, and even the frozen like spinach, things like that. If you actually blend them all together, you can make a nice, more healthily balanced pasta sauce that you could use, even with basic pastas. So for example, we've got, this is from a food pantry around here, but this is just spaghetti, and this one's actually enriched. So a lot of food pantries will carry enriched products, or even if you are buying at a dollar store, try to look for products that are enriched. They'll have a little bit more vitamin and mineral content in them, which can help if you have trouble accessing like fresher vegetables and things like that. So this is actually made out of wheat, durum wheat flour, and it's got a whole lot of vitamins and minerals in it. It's got vitamin B3, it's got iron, it's got vitamin B1, vitamin B2, folic acid. So this type of pasta is great to use. And again, if you make your own pasta sauce, that could be a really nice way to add a little bit more nutrition to that, and you can incorporate all sorts of vegetables into that. And usually when you mix it and blend it up like that, kids are not as likely to notice that there's vegetables in it. So if they're a little picky, that might be a good way to go about it. We also do have, of course, some pasta sauces that you can find. This one's from Aldi, and this again is a good, nice way of getting some vegetable content in your meals in a way that doesn't feel like you have to do a whole lot. So this is just tomato puree, it's got some onion in it, it's got some basil, so this type of thing can be really good as well. The only thing that we want to watch out for when consuming a lot of these canned foods is the sodium content, but we'll talk about that in a bit and ways to kind of manage that. So again, just to summarize that little part there, eat the rainbow. That's the main thing to remember here with fruits and vegetables, just to try to get as many varied colors of vegetables and fruits as we can. If you use frozen fruits, you could also make smoothies. You could add frozen spinach to your smoothies. You could add all sorts of things, really. It's kind of just up to your palate and your kids' palate, of course. But there's ways to make it tasty. So the next thing we wanted to point out, which is also in this pamphlet over here by the maze, is that breakfast is very important. So breakfast builds strong brains. So what kids eat changes how they think, learn, and feel at school. So getting a healthy breakfast can help them stay focused and learn better and get better grades when they're in school. A quick little tip for that is to offer your kids a quick breakfast. So something like oatmeal with fruit, a hard-boiled egg, or if you're able to get your hands on some whole grain toast, that's also great with some peanut butter. Now, for breakfast, we do want to try to emphasize having a good source of protein in there. We don't want to just depend on carbs, because what happens with carbohydrates is that if they only eat carbs, it'll cause a spike in energy and in sugar levels in the body, but it tends to crash a lot faster. So they might lose their energy a lot earlier if they're only eating carbohydrates. So for example, with our oats, this is again from Aldi, nice and affordable, quick cook. So these cook very fast, and there's a bunch of different types of oats that you can get. These are 100% whole grain, so every serving of oats has 40 grams of whole grains, which is one of our key food groups that we want to try to have. So if you make something like quick oats, again, you can add some fruit to it. If you're not able to get your hands on fresh fruit, you can get some frozen berries. Frozen berries could go a long way, especially if you add them while it's cooking, so they can kind of warm up. And that can add a good bit of flavor to that. But since this is mostly a source of carbohydrate, we would want to incorporate some type of protein into the meal if possible. So a way to do that would be, if you're able to get your hands on some eggs, you could throw in a boiled egg, or I know there's some people that even like to crack the egg into the oatmeal and cook it with the oatmeal, kind of like a scrambled situation. If that's your thing, that could also be a great way to add a little bit more protein to that. But we do want to try to emphasize that protein for breakfast is very important and a very healthy component of a diet, especially for kids. I know some other choices that people like to include in breakfast could be things like sausage or bacon. Those things are great. Now, they do often have a lot of sodium, so that's just something to watch out for. Again, we're going to go over sodium in a little bit, but we just want to make sure that we're controlling how much sodium we're eating every day, because that can lead to some more dangerous health effects in the long run. So, moving on from breakfast, another important point is, again, protein. We want to emphasize protein is very important, but alongside protein, calcium is also very important, especially for kids and helping them build strong bodies. So again, as you know, kids grow very fast and they need protein and calcium to help grow tall, to keep their bones and teeth and muscles strong. So one of the things that we can do when we're depending mostly on canned items, more low budget items, is incorporating canned meats into your meals. So I do have a couple of examples here. We have canned tuna. This is tuna chunks in water. And we have canned chicken in water as well. So both of these options, although they're canned, they can still add a lot of extra nutritional content to your meals. And adding them to your meals can improve the protein count. Eggs are also, like we talked about, another great option to add. But for example, when you make your rice and beans, something you could do is, if you like chicken, or if your kids like chicken, you could open up a can of chicken and you can add this to your rice while it's cooking, and then that way you have a little bit extra protein in that meal without having to necessarily buy a whole fresh chicken or chicken breasts or what have you and cook them separately. This you could literally just throw right into that same meal that you're cooking already. Now, with things like this, what I would suggest is, since this already has a good amount of sodium in it, when you're cooking your rice and beans, just try to limit the amount of salt that you're adding to that while you're cooking it if you're going to add this, which already has salt in it. Tuna is really good as well with most meals. There's a lot of different things you can do with tuna though, of course. Some other options that are great sources of calcium as well are cheese and shelf-stable milk. So you might also know shelf-stable milk as UHT milk. So usually this is going to be like boxed versions of milk. Those actually have pretty good sources of calcium. So if you're not able to get your hands on like refrigerated milk, the boxed option is great, you know, just to get a little bit of that nutritional content there. And that can always be added to things such as oatmeal. I know sometimes the recipes suggest to just make it with water, but if you're able to get your hands on some milk, that's a great way to boost that nutritional content and help your kids be able to grow their bones and teeth and everything a little bit stronger. So another thing here that's very important is fiber. So fiber is going to help keep your stomachs happy, both for you and for your child, of course. Now, this is because foods with fiber digest a little bit slower. So when things have a lot of fiber content, they're going to help keep that feeling of fullness and help boost energy for a longer period of time. So you know how earlier I was saying that eating carb-heavy meals for breakfast kind of causes a spike and then a crash? So whenever you have something that has a little bit more fiber content, which you can get from vegetables, certain fruits, a lot of foods will have, in the nutritional facts section, you'll see a little area that says dietary fiber. So dietary fiber is what you're looking for there. If you're able to include things with a higher amount of dietary fiber, it's going to be a lot better for digestion. So here's an example from some red kidney beans. They have 8 grams of dietary fiber. So adding beans to your meals helps boost fiber content. Again, vegetables have a good bit of fiber in them as well. So that's going to help keep your children and yourself full and energized for a longer time. It helps prevent constipation, and it also helps keep blood sugar from spiking. So this prevents things like diabetes from developing or from worsening. If you or your children already have some type of diabetes, we want to try to manage that blood sugar level as much as possible, and that's one of the ways that we can do it, by adding more fiber into content that already has carbohydrates. It can try to balance it a little bit and prevent blood from spiking too much. So some options that we can do are whole wheat bread or brown rice if they're available to you. Some food pantries actually now carry brown rice. Bread is a little bit harder to find sometimes because it doesn't last as long a lot of the time when it's more like whole wheat. But things like brown rice are definitely something that I've been noticing a lot more often in the local food pantries here. So that's definitely an option to look out for if you're able to get your hands on that. Again, canned beans or frozen vegetables are a really good way of boosting fiber. So again, with our example, we have our red kidney beans. We also have, if you're more of a pigeon peas person, gandules, we've got some pigeon peas. Canned pigeon peas also have some dietary fiber in them. Not as much as the beans, but this one has, let's see, a serving size has 4 grams of dietary fiber, versus for the beans, a serving has 9 grams. But regardless, I mean, that's a good way to start adding some fiber to your diet. If you're already making rice, might as well throw in some type of bean in there. Helps both with fiber and with some extra protein in there. Things such as canned tomatoes has a tiny bit of dietary fiber, but it's not going to be as much as you'll find in frozen vegetables or in fresh vegetables. So definitely, when possible, I would go with more of the fresh version of things or the frozen version of things when we're talking about vegetables and things like that. This one, for example, doesn't actually tell you how much dietary fiber is in it, but this is just canned red peppers, so probably has a little bit more than our canned tomatoes if I had to guess, but sometimes you won't find all that information on them specifically. But just to note, frozen tends to have a little bit better content there. Moving on to the sodium situation that we had talked about. A lot of canned foods are going to have a large amount of sodium in them, and this is because it's used as a preservative. So a lot of the more budget-friendly foods that you might find might be a little bit more unhealthy in terms of the salt content. Now, when you have too much salt in your diet, it can increase blood pressure. And what happens with that is that it can cause strain on your heart. So it's important to buy low sodium options whenever possible. I don't know if any of our options here today are low sodium. Sometimes it is hard to find. So I guess this one's kind of an example. The pigeon peas, this particular can is a low sodium option. Now, even though it does say low sodium, you'll notice that each serving has 135 milligrams of sodium in it, which is only 6% of the daily value for the day, but that can build up really fast. And again, that's just for one serving size, which is half a cup. So you have to be very conscious of how much you're eating and the salt content that you're getting altogether from everything that you might eat, especially if you're adding your canned meats and things like that to it on top of what's already in your other canned vegetables. So normally for most people, we would say to try to limit your sodium to 2 grams a day. So technically, since a serving of this is 135 milligrams, there's a pretty good window to be able to eat your canned foods, but we just don't want to get past that certain number. And in general, we just want to be very wary of having too much sodium in our meals, again, because it can really lead to issues with increased blood pressure, and that can cause more issues in the long run, such as strokes and heart attacks and things like that. So especially for kids, we want to try to make sure that they're growing nice and strong, that they're not developing any issues with their hearts early on. So definitely watch for that sodium content when possible. So another little tip that we wanted to give actually with some of the canned items is that when you use canned vegetables or canned beans, you can actually wash some of the sodium away. So when you open your can of beans, I normally tend to drain my canned foods, the water that's in them or whatever they're in. I usually drain it before I add it to whatever I'm cooking, and that can definitely help. But something that you can do is before you drain it completely, if you have a strainer or something, you can drain the entire can into the strainer and rinse it with some water in your sink. And that actually helps reduce the content by a lot. So I actually have a little fact here. I believe this source for this was from the American Heart Association, but I could be wrong. I'll double check in a sec, or I might have them in the back of this sheet actually. But whenever you're using canned vegetables or beans, if you open the can, pour it into a strainer, and rinse it under cold water for 30 seconds, it can actually wash up to 40% of the excess salt that is in that canned item. So that can help a long way with reducing the sodium content that you're eating. And again, especially when you're cooking and you're already adding more salt to things, you really want to try to keep an eye out for that. Sometimes we get used to the taste, the flavor of things that are saltier, and it can be hard to cut back on it because it feels like there's no flavor to it. But just remember that some good ways to add flavor to things could be by throwing in like other spices, things like garlic powder, onion powder. There's a lot of different ways to add flavor to things other than just salt. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And then another tip that we had, if you or your kids like things like boxed mac and cheese or instant soups, if they come in with a flavor packet, so for example when you're making ramen or when you're making like Kraft macaroni and cheese or something like that, if you only use half of the flavor packet, that can help reduce the sodium content. And then another thing that you can add to it is some canned vegetables. So if you're making let's say some ramen, so again, reduce the sodium content by cutting the packet in half and only using half of the flavor packet. But something else you can do is you can rinse a can of maybe some bell peppers or some green beans or something like that. You can rinse that in the sink, get some of that sodium content out, and you can mix that in with your soup or your ramen, and that can add some extra fiber and some extra flavor while also reducing the amount of salt. And by adding things to your meals, not only are you boosting the nutritional quality of it, but you're also finding a way to kind of stretch the meal so that it lasts longer. You have a little bit more of a final product in terms of like how much food you're able to make, so you can split it up into more portions and be able to feed your family a little bit better. So that's that on salt. Less salt is a safer heart. And then finally, we wanted to talk about the topic of water and juice. So again, with kids, a lot of kids love their juice. However, we wanted to just point out again that things that are highly sweet, so like soda, juice, sports drinks like energy drinks, Gatorade, things like that, they can have a lot of sugar content. And a lot of sugar, again, like we talked about with having too many carbs for breakfast, it can cause energy to spike and then crash like very, very fast. So it can cause your kids and even yourself, if you consume a lot of sugar, you'll get a sudden boost of energy, but then you'll feel kind of like crappy the rest of the day. You know, you won't feel very good, and that's because of that little spike and crash. But it can also cause tooth decay, and it can cause unhealthy weight gain. So whenever you're thirsty or your kid is thirsty, one of the best ways to try to help with thirst is with water. So water prevents thirst, and it also keeps the body healthy. So it's always important to serve your meals with water. And I know sometimes, you know, you might get a child that complains because the water doesn't taste like anything, it's bland, you know, especially if they're used to having their juices. So something that you can do for a little extra flavor, or even while you're trying to transition them to mostly drinking water rather than soda or juice, is to add a little splash of juice to the water. So if you like sparkling water, for example, like for me, I used to be a heavy soda drinker, and something that I had to do to try to limit my sugar intake was to reduce my soda intake. And now I don't really drink soda a lot, but I found that for me, what I really liked about soda was the fizziness of it. So When I go to Aldi, for example, I like to get some sparkling water, and that kind of still gives me that fizzy feeling to it, but it's sparkling water, so it doesn't have any sugar added to it. And usually with those, if you get some plain sparkling water, you can enhance the flavor by adding a little bit of lime juice, or even mixing it with frozen fruit. And that's something that you can do even with regular water. It's a nice, fun, tasty way to kind of boost the water that you're drinking if you struggle with kind of getting over like the, I guess, bland flavor of just regular water, which I totally understand. You know, not everyone likes water, and sometimes we need a little extra flavor in there to try to make things a little bit more fun, you know. So that's definitely something that can be done for yourself or for your kids. Again, if you buy like frozen berries, something that I like to do is add like frozen raspberries or blackberries to my water, and even if you give that a little mix, you'll notice that the berries tend to turn it like a purple or pink color, and that alone can kind of help give the illusion that you're drinking something a little bit more than water. It's almost like, oh, I'm drinking some juice, I'm drinking like a fun little quirky drink, you know. So that's always an option for trying to boost your water intake, which is very important. And again, especially for kids, we want to try to prevent them from gaining unhealthy weight, which can again lead to things like diabetes, tooth decay. There's a whole lot of things that can kind of spiral lead to one another. So if we want to try to get them to develop as healthily as possible, that's one of the things that we want to keep an eye out for. So that is all of the information that we have in our little packet. And again, I can hand this to you if you want, if you're interested. We have our sources on the second page. So if you want to look at any of the links where any of this information came from, or if you want to look up a couple more things, that's definitely on there. And of course, you can take our pamphlet with you, and if you're able to, this is basically all the same information that I went over, but a little bit more concise. And I know it still looks like a lot, but it's still a good little way to kind of remember the basic things that we talked about today for making some more nutritional choices with meals, especially for your children. So again, if you're able to incorporate some of this into your diet, even if it's just starting with a little bit of things, like just adding a couple of canned vegetables to meals, things like that, it can go a long way. And again, if your kids want to play around with any of this in the pamphlet, do the little word search, do the little maze or the word search in the back, or draw some examples of these different food groups in here. That's a great way to try to get them engaged and interested in eating healthy. And I always like to say that healthy nutrition shouldn't be just about limiting things and restricting things completely. So we don't want to tell people to completely avoid eating the things that they like to eat. It can lead to like eating disorders and things like that. There's definitely ways to eat the things that are fun and that we like to eat, but in moderation, while also adding things of more nutritional value to the meals that we already like. And I think that this is a great way to start. So definitely give this a little read if you're able to. There's some other little tips in here that we didn't go over, but just some other little ideas of some snacks that are great for grab and go for your kids. So there's a little bit more information in there if you'd like to read through it. And if you know anybody that could use some more information on this, of course, feel free to point them our way. I'll be here the rest of the day, and I have a lot more of these pamphlets. Again, they're in English and in Spanish, so if you know anyone that could use the information in Spanish too, we have that, and we also have the info in these sheets. So here's that as well if you would like. Okay, perfect. And as you make your way out, feel free to stop by our food pantry. We have a lot of these same items there. There's a little bit more variety in the pantry. I just grabbed a couple of things to use as examples here, but we do have some other things that I didn't go over, like canned pumpkin. We do have, of course, if you want to avoid the canned foods, because of the sodium content, for things like beans and all that, we have bagged dry beans. And you'll notice actually with things like the bagged beans, they tend to have a little bit better of nutritional content than the canned version of beans sometimes per serving. So this bag, in one serving, which is a 4th cup of these beans, you actually have 17 grams of dietary fiber, compared to in these red kidney beans, the 8 grams of dietary fiber in every half cup. So there's definitely different options to play around with, and lots of different ways to try to boost nutrition for you and for your children, again with the goal of making sure that we're developing healthy minds and bodies, and we want them to do well and to grow up well. So yeah, of course. No, it's been a pleasure talking to you and sharing some of this information, and I hope that you get something out of it. Of course. Alrighty, take care.